Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweating working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network. Welcome to Drafting the Circuits. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we go over this big weekend of racing that we've had. Luis Torres and Richard Uden are joining me in the studio. Guys, how we doing?
Good, thank you.
Pretty good.
Well, guys, racing season is now fully upon us. We've had our first weekend with all three major series running. Three very different, very entertaining races. I have to say, I was enjoyed the weekend tremendously. The races were different in different ways, but we had at the end of the day was Max Verstappen winning in Imola at Formula One. Alex Palou, first time winner in the Indy Car series, taking the win at Barber, and Alex Bowman winning at in Richmond, punching his ticket to the playoffs there, kind of stealing a win. If you'll have it. So, but anyway, let's start with Formula One. We'll go through these races chronologically in the orders that they ended. So Max Verstappen wins in Formula One in Imola. Lewis Hamilton second, but a hard fought second. And again, for those folks who like to say that, Lewis only wins a lot because of the car. I have to say there was some really fantastic driving on display from young Mr. Hamilton this past weekend. Richard, what did you think about this race from Imola?
Indeed, it was a classic, wasn't it? In more ways than one, it had a classic track with some classic, overtaking moves, and it was a really, really good race, and how it should be in the on these sort of old style circuits, and. Oh, good grief. Sorry about that. Couldn't find the mute button in time there. Sorry, guys. I'm sure I can edit that out.
Well, yeah. God bless you.
Where were we? Yes. So, Grand Prix at Imola. Fantastic to be back there again. Second time in pretty much probably 6 months. I think it was like November when we were there back end of last year. And, a little bit different, a little bit warmer there this year. And, You saw what you expected to see in some ways, and you saw some slightly unusual performances and things you didn't really expect to see. To start off, unfortunately, Mazepin was doing his ballerina impression and spinning at pretty much every given opportunity, it's a shame, really. Unfortunately, you do worry about the kid. He's getting a bit of a reputation now after only being 2 races in to his Formula One career, but he's not really not helping himself, unfortunately. But he did finish the race.
The poor kid had a bad reputation before he ever turned a wheel in Formula One.
Very true.
Yeah.
And then he
did finish the race, but had late spins.
Well, other than that, he hasn't done anything to redeem himself or to say, hey, look, I deserve this seat. But there's a lot of races left.
Of course, right? And, we say that we had other guys spinning. Alonso span, Charles Leclerc span in practice there and knocked the front wing off. It wasn't easy. And it's good to see. How good is it to see a driver make a mistake and hit a wall? I mean, you don't want to hit a wall, obviously, but you look at Tsunoda in qualifying there. After that great race in Bahrain where he scored points in his debut, to come back and pushing it through the top chicane there and just got a little bit of snap oversteer in the middle of the chicane. He overcorrected, and it's very easy to do. Rookie mistake, for sure. And just hits the outside of the wall and cracks his gearbox. Makes a real mess of the car. And it was great to see. Drivers make mistakes and they get punished for them. And on the Tsunoda, the great thing was you saw the coverage of him at the end of qualifying. He walked into the garage there. He didn't have his helmet on or anything like that. A lot of the drivers do. They sort of try and hide from the press and hide from the media behind the helmet. He didn't have his helmet on. He was carrying it under his arm. Walked into the garage and was like, "Yep, sorry guys, my mistake. Let's get the car fixed and go again tomorrow." Really refreshing to see that. Really refreshing to see, and I think he's got a really really good attitude there on his, pretty young shoulders. But through qualifying, a little bit of a surprise there. Hamilton got pole, followed by Perez and Verstappen. Both Red Bull drivers say they made little mistakes and dropped time in qualifying, and they like to think they could have got ahead of Hamilton. All things being equal without those mistakes. And I'm sure if you ask Hamilton as well, he could say he made a couple of mistakes which cost him. But it was a good, tight, close qualifying. It really is such fine margins in there, and I don't know what you guys thought about it. If you saw the qualifying, but they really have to do something about this track limits rule, because the number of lap times that were getting knocked off in qualifying due to track limits violations. And yeah, I know there's the limit, but they've got to do something. I say it's one of these old-fashioned tracks. Well, move the outside of the track, make it so there's no such thing as track limits. Make it so that if you do exceed track limits, you lose time by dipping a wheel in the gravel, you're going in the grass, having to lift, not by, not losing time by losing your time. And Lando Norris was the prime example. He had the third fastest time and ended up losing that because he probably exceeded track limits by an inch or two, which cost him hundredths of a second here or there. And instead of starting third, started fifth or sixth, I think it was, maybe even a little bit further back. Top 10, but not where he probably should have been. But
it just seems to me like the track limit rules are applied so harshly in qualifying.
Yeah,
and then guys are all over the place during the race. As long as they don't.
Yeah. Well, so no, they did get a penalty during the race for exceeding track limits. So they
multiple
are
times.
doing it. But it's almost give them an opportunity to take advantage of something, and guess what? They're going to take advantage of it, because if they don't do it, limits, then they're going to try and do it, and they're going to hope they can get away with it. And these guys are the best in the world. Don't get me wrong, but you're not telling me they can tell a difference between, half an inch either side of being in or out track limits, maybe 6 inches or a foot, but certainly not half an inch or whatever some of these limits are. So I think they really need to look at that and look at, how they affect the driving style. Put some of these sausage curbs, 2 meters beyond the track, where you want your track limit to be. So if you do go that wide, your right hand side of your car, or if it's a left hand, if it's a left hand corner, you've got the runoff there. The right hand side of the car does hit these curbs and will unsettle you, because that'll stop them pretty damn quickly. But yeah, it's they really need to change that for the show, because that was disappointing and that was unfortunate. Really, it left a little bit of a bitter taste in the mouth post qualifying there. But coming into the race, woke up Sunday morning and it was raining. You look on all the satellite and radars and it wasn't meant to, but sure enough, we had light rain. Wasn't anything crazy heavy. Half the track was dry, but the bottom half around start finish line and into all the way up through the Tamburello Villeneuve chicanes and up into Tosa there were pretty wet. Top half of the circuit was dry, and that's always great when you have that mix. That really sort of unsettles them. And because it was cool, what was it? The air temperature was at like 12 or 13 degrees Celsius, which is what, mid 50s probably Fahrenheit. It's just not warm enough to get that dry line being created quickly. And it didn't. I mean, it took till pretty much half distance of the race before guys were really starting to venture out onto slick tyres, even though it hadn't rained for the majority of the race. It was just light drizzle, basically. So at the start of the race, Hamilton started on pole with Perez second and Verstappen third. And Verstappen made a fantastic start. Got ahead of Hamilton going into the first chicane there. The little bit of contact, maybe minor. Didn't knocked a little bit of bodywork off Hamilton's car, but in the grand scheme of things, very, very, very little. And then we go through that, and there was an early safety car there, and Mick Schumacher unfortunately span under the safety car trying to keep his tyres warm and knocked his front wing off, which was a little bit embarrassing for the guy, I'm sure. And it was funny listening to his race engineer sort of coach him back through the couple of laps, because the pit lane was closed while they recovered Mick Schumacher's front wing, which was blocking pit lane exit. So they closed the pit lane, so he couldn't come back in to change the nose straight away. And his race engineer was sort of coaching him around, saying, "It's okay, Mick, don't worry, I haven't lost any track time. You just go slow, we'll make it." It was quite, excuse me, quite interesting listening to that. But Mick did a pretty solid job, got some good laps on there, finished the race again. So, you could give him credit there. But the two things really that sort of came about it was as the track was drying, Hamilton was pushing to try and catch up with Verstappen, which he was doing to a certain extent. And going into the Tosa hairpin at the top of the track, basically just lost it, made a mistake, going through some of the backbacks. I think it was actually George Russell, who we'll come back to later, who maybe just got Hamilton out of his rhythm a little bit, and he ran off and clipped the barriers and, managed to reverse back onto the track and come in and change his nose, which, you helped him, that he was able to do that. He didn't stall the car, which is it's harder to do these days with the hybrid cars, because you can almost use the battery pack as a starter motor, and you pretty much can't stall them these days. But he managed to get the car back out.
Wasn't there was a little controversy over whether or not the backing onto the track was safe, or it's not really against the rules. I think the rules just say you have to make a safe re-entry on the track. But there were some folks that felt like reversing onto the track was not safe, although the FAA didn't make an issue out of it. So
no, there's two things there. Firstly, he can't be pushed back onto the track. He could be pushed if he's in a dangerous position and then recover. But if he was out of the way like he was there, he couldn't have been pushed back onto the track. If he'd been, a few feet off the edge of the track and potentially in a dangerous place, then marshals could push him to move him. And then if he got free, he could have recovered. That would have been allowed. And the other thing the reversing rule really is you can't reverse in the pit lane. That's a big no-no. Just ask, I think it was Nigel Mansell, wasn't it, that got had for that in the 80s, was it? In Portugal, late 80s, I think he reversed in the pit lane, and he got disqualified. So reversing in the pit lane is a no-no, but reversing on track, as long as it's safe, and you're perfectly allowed to do that. I mean, that's why the cars, by the legality, have to have a reverse gear. So if you have to legally have a reverse gear, you thought you'd be allowed to use it, wouldn't you, really? So Hamilton managed to get that. He dropped almost back to about 10th, wasn't it, I think? And then, then there was probably the most controversial or hottest talking point of the race. Bottas in the Mercedes there, he'd been off Friday he was okay, but Saturday, Sunday, he was nowhere. Qualified 5th, I think it was. And then after the start of the race,
qualified 8th or so.
8th, was it? Yeah, I know he
was
qualified well
MIA
down
all race. It was just bad.
Yeah,
about that in a moment.
Yeah, and he just couldn't get that rhythm, and it is all about rhythm to these guys. He couldn't get any rhythm, and he dropped back to, I think he was outside the top 10 at the start of the race. Picked up a couple of spots and was running about 8th or 9th, and then as they went through that sequence of going onto the dry tires, and I think Bottas was probably the last driver to go onto the dry tire. So at the point in question that we're going to talk about here, he was probably on the coldest set of tires. So he was struggling, and cold track temperature, cold air temperature. It's difficult to get the tires into the right operating window. And George Russell was having a great race. He got into Q2, which was a fantastic achievement. Qualified strong. I think he qualified 12th or 13th. Really, really good showing again. Actually, both Williams got into Q2, which was a fantastic achievement. And, Russell was having a really good, really solid race there. And, he just got basically going into the first chicane, DRS was open, and your line for that corner is you clip the inside left curb just at the start finish line, and then you drift to the right hand side of the track to sweep back to the left for the first corner of the Tamburello chicane. And Russell was that much faster. He actually got alongside Bottas just after that, just at the point where Bottas was starting to drift across the track. Now, Bottas gave him room. There's no doubt about that. There was more than a car's width on the side of the track when Russell lost control. Russell probably went a little bit wider than he would have liked and caught his right side tyres on the paint, which was still wet, and was very, very slippery, which caused Russell to lose control, spin left into Bottas, and made a real mess. I ended up red flagging the race there.
Yeah, it was quite a shunt. It
was a big hit. Valtteri on the radio was winded. It's not the first time you've heard him like that. It was a big hit. And, again, you've got to give credit to the halo. You look at the damage on Valtteri's halo there, at the initial impact, Russell rode up the side of Valtteri's car, and, large portions of Russell's front left wheel and suspension assembly were probably, would have been in the driver cockpit area if it wasn't for the halo. So, again, credit where credit's due to that system. Potentially made a big difference there. But immediately post accident, as all with all drivers, they were blaming each other and finger pointing, and Russell actually went over and slapped Valtteri around the helmet a little bit there while he was still in his car. And, I can understand Russell's frustration. Again, a really good, strong showing there in the race, really competitive, and just lost the opportunity to score points again, which is really what, he's looking to do. And, of course, he's the Mercedes protege, and many people are eyeing him up for Valtteri's ride, and of course, crashing into Valtteri doesn't exactly go down too well with Mercedes management.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was about to go with that. You want to be real careful going smacking Valtteri around,
for sure. But something strange going on with this relationship between Toto and George Russell. After Russell should have won the Sakir Grand Prix last year, when in all fairness, Mercedes, to put it bluntly, screwed up and, botched his pit stops. And he had a puncture, which wasn't necessarily his fault, but, it was just clumsy. Toto was saying, Valtteri needs to cut out the mistakes. Well, Toto, you were the one that cost him the race there by making a mistake yourself. So, that was a little bit. And then this time he comes out and he's very critical of George. And, maybe it's one of these tough love scenarios. I still think Russell has a fantastic future in the sport and is undoubtedly heir apparent to Hamilton's sort of British, top British driver throne, I think. No disrespect to guys like Lando Norris, but I definitely think Russell is the guy to take that position at the Mercedes team, especially. But flip it around. What happens if Russell had backed out and not tried to make that move? There'd be just as many people criticising him for not going for it. I mean, what was it that, the famous quote by Ayrton Senna, which I'm sure is paraphrased in some ways, but he said something along the lines of, if there's a gap there and you don't go for it, you're no longer a racing driver. And it's a little bit extreme, but to a certain extent it's true. If Russell hadn't gone for that spot, what was he supposed to do? He had DRS, he was 20 miles an hour faster than him. There was an opportunity there. And maybe he made a mistake, but he had to go for it. And it was a racing incident. I think that you could argue Valtteri maybe should have given him a little bit more room, knowing that, you're going to push somebody onto the wet side of the track there. But I don't lay blame in any driver's door there. It was a racing accident. And I think people who are criticising Russell would also be the first people to criticise him if he didn't go for that move. So it's
exactly, he might have gotten away with that in drier conditions.
Oh, in drier conditions,
certainly, yeah,
straight past him. But again, if it had been a dry race, I don't think Valtteri would have been where he was, and I don't think Russell would have been where he was. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it all kind of meshes together. So,
but yeah, no, I think that it was harsh, and then Hamilton ended up driving back through the pack. Finishing really strong second. Norris got on the podium there to finish in a fantastic third place, fully deserved. Charles Leclerc got a P4 for Ferrari. Alonso got his first point since coming back, with Kimi Räikkönen being penalised there. And I thought it was a really, really good race on a really good circuit. And I really do hope they look to try and keep this one on there, because it's a fantastic track, and
it's got so much. It's got so much
of the place.
Exactly, it's got so much history. That's what I was right about to say.
And it's like the old. It reminds me of like the old Hockenheim and Spa in a way. They have, if the trees could talk, sort of thing. You can just imagine it's a very eerie place on like a cold February morning with the mist, and it's almost like a scene out of Dracula or something, isn't it? It has that feeling about it. It's not one of these like Tilke domes. It's got character and passion about it. I really do hope they keep going there.
I hope so too. So now, where are we off to next?
We're off to Algarve, Portugal, in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. So
it'll be the 2nd of May is the race weekend.
All right.
Yeah, that would be
May.
correct.
And then it's 9th of May is Spain.
So right now, my understanding is that Max and Lewis both each have a first and a second. So and Lewis has
the fast.
Yeah, Lewis got a point for a fastest lap, so he leads.
Correct.
By 1 point.
By 1 point.
By 1
point.
And so
this year it's so close that it really could come down to single points here or there. And before we move on, and before not to sort of hog everybody's time here, but I was thinking about this a little bit today. Mercedes and Red Bull are so close this year. Are we going to see a development war between Red Bull and Mercedes? And if you see that, how much will that detract from their 2022 car? So in a way, the guys like McLaren and Alpine and Ferrari, they probably want Mercedes and Red Bull to be, hammering it out and fighting, slugging it out like a heavyweight boxing match throughout the season, because that means they'll be taking up resources to try and concentrate on 2021 and win the championship. And it'll give these guys who are maybe turning around and saying, okay, look, we're putting 80-90% of our resources into 2022 already, and we'll just check a few boxes on 2021 just to go through the motions. Those guys could really get a huge head start on next year and potentially leapfrog, or at least get a lot closer to the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull. So in a way, a close title fight this year could be great for 2022.
Right, especially those guys that are right on the cusp. You look at look how much McLaren has improved last week. Look how much better Williams is than they are a year ago or 2 years ago. And
the one question I have is right now, a run like Imola come back to by one team or the other, because had Perez not had his mistakes after the red flag, Red Bull would be sitting pretty comfortably right now with the I almost said manufacturers again. It's the second time this week I almost said constructors championship to where mistakes, like a bad week for Bottas and ultimately an overall bad week with Perez outside of qualifying second. Those are the kind of instances where you want to have imagine if all four were in the mix. They would be much, much tighter. But it makes me wonder if we will look back to, I know it's round 2 of a long season in Formula One, but imagine if when it comes down to the very end, looking at Imola and say Mercedes somehow find a way to win it again in the constructors, you probably will look back at Perez's mistakes and downfall after the red flag as probably one of the what ifs they had, and had he not had that thing, would Red Bull be in the mix? Would Red Bull be in that, like, gaining?
Sure.
Undoubtedly,
It's this close this year that the championships of both drivers and constructors are going to be decided on such fine margins that even you've got was it 23 race calendar now? So
22 or 23, pending on the Canadian Grand Prix.
Yeah, well, they're talking about going to Turkey if Canada gets knocked. There you go. Yeah, my English is good. If Canada gets knocked off, then they're talking about going to Turkey. So they want to try and keep that 23 race calendar. But yeah, you're talking about, each race is like single digit percentage of the whole overall championship, and it's so close. But little points here and there. Somebody has a DNF, Hamilton or Verstappen has a DNF. I truly believe that because they've never really pushed each other. Verstappen has never led the championship in his career. So yeah, he's got close and he's won 11 races now, and yeah, he's battled with Hamilton, for the last couple of years, but he's never really had a car that's comparable. I think we could almost be in like the scenario we saw in the late 80s where Senna and Prost just almost elevate each other onto a new level. And I feel potentially sorry for guys like Perez and Bottas, who just are the collateral in these two phenomenal drivers, just keep raising their game week after week after week. And they're going to leave those guys in the dust. I really, truly believe that we could be in for probably one of the, arguably, a season that is compared to something like 88, when, those guys were so dominant, winning, 18 out of 19 races or 17 out of 18 races, whatever it was. I think you could see again this season Hamilton and Verstappen win every race between them, or maybe only not win one or two. I think it could be a classic season.
It certainly can. Yeah,
those guys, like if one of those days, if Bottas or Perez have a good day, then teams like Ferrari and McLaren are going to have a real hard time finding podiums. I do feel like Ferrari could be in trouble in the podium streak is concerned, because I don't see them getting a podium yet at the moment. Probably not at all this season, unless circumstances fall in their favor.
Yeah, Leclerc, for sure. Now, Leclerc seems to have a grasp of the car in qualifying. Again, it's 2 weeks in a row he's qualified, or 2 races in a row he's qualified in the top 4, isn't it, I think? So, he's obviously got the car underneath him. It's not a million miles away. It's obviously a lot more competitive than it was last year. And admittedly, a couple of those podiums that, Ferrari managed to score last year were a little bit fortuitous, for sure. But, they'll be there or thereabouts. Maybe they can pick up the odd one or two, but they're not going to be regular podium scorers. Basically, you've got 18 guys fighting for one podium position.
Pretty much. All right, guys, we need to move on so we don't.
Indeed,
because we do have all 3 series to talk about. So we spent 27 minutes on Formula One, so we'll have to pour NASCAR. But we talk about them enough. Anyway, so the Indy Cars are at Barber Motorsports Park, and new winner, Alex Palou from Spain. Young guy, he's cut his teeth in the Super Formula racing in Japan. His first season in Indy Cars was last year with Dale Coyne. He caught the eye of Chip Ganassi. Chip Ganassi put him in the 10 car. Felix Rosenqvist moved over to McLaren. And now this guy's a race winner. The other star of the show was young Pato O'Ward, who took the pole in his McLaren, his second pole position in the series, and kind of led handily. But his the difference in strategy between Palou and O'Ward was the difference there. Palou stretched it out, did a 2-stop race. O'Ward opted to do 3 stops. And the thing is, the big thing takeaway for me on the difference there is just what a fine job Palou did at managing his tires and his fuel and his car on those longer stints. And you could see the way things were going for Pato. There was no way he would have been able to manage the tires and the car quite as well as Palou did. And again, this is, Palou was in that Ganassi stable there that are pretty much experts at winning championships. As we saw there at the end of the day, his teammate Scott Dixon joined him on the podium. Will Power was second. Award strategy just backfired on him. Alexander Rossi, who had qualified second, was on the same strategy as Award. That backfired on him as well. Now, as impressed as I was with Palou and Award to a large extent, one of the things that stick with me is just how underwhelmed I was by some of these guys I expected more from. And I'm talking Pagenaud, who's kind of nowhere to be found. Newgarden made a made a big mistake.
Yeah,
took out.
bad.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect that type of mistake, that type of the impatience that early in the race out of a guy who's a two-time champion. And like I said, Rossi was just nowhere. I mean, he qualified well and he ran up near the front, but then the rest of the day he was just he was there. He wasn't very aggressive. He wasn't, I mean, for a guy who has his sights set on the championship and nothing else this year, I just didn't see that out of him. So now, Louise, what were some of your takeaways from the racer? I know you're a pretty big fan of young Alex Palou, are you not?
Yeah, like I mentioned, that decision of him going to Ganassi is going to be very like a steal almost. Because
it's not much of a decision to make, is it really?
Well, yeah, you go from Felix Rosenqvist, who could be equally as good, but when he went to McLaren and they found Palou, I saw that was a very good get, because what we saw with Dale Cole and Team Go it's kind of like I mentioned, he came into the States as basically a virtual unknown. And then he had those impressive runs at Road America. Sure, some of the finishes were not the greatest, but he showed a lot of promise. And then they put him with Ganassi. Right out of the gate, he was duking it out with the top guys of Indy Car, like with Dixon, his teammate, and even Penske and Andretti. Speaking of Andretti,
he held off Will Power at the end there at the final stint.
Yeah, he held on. He held his own real well, and that is going to be very key for his development over time, how he will adapt to those established guys. Like you mentioned, Will Power, he held his own real good compared to O'Ward, who, like you mentioned, tire management was a gremlin for him in my book. Like at the start, he was not feeling the red tires, the red Firestones that to his liking, and that kind of did hurt him a bit. And also Palou finding a way to stretch the strategy. And that's the kind of why Palou became the third Ganassi driver to win in their debut, joining Michael Andretti and Dan Whelvin. And Palou, an O'Ward would have to wait another race to probably get that shot of winning, which could happen this Sunday at St. Petersburg based on what we saw a year ago. He was he finished on the podium, if I recall. But no doubt, excellent run for Palou. And honestly, does not surprise me. But I was pretty impressed also with the guys of Roman Grosjean and Marcus Ericsson both getting top tens. Like I said last week, for Jim, like a guy like Jimmy Johnson, if he's right up there with Ericsson, which was definitely not the case at all for Johnson, maybe we'll see. That'll be a good sign. But good run for Ericsson.
Ericsson was running right there, I believe, in fourth until I think he stretched his fuel just a bit much at the end there and didn't quite make it all the way around to the line and dropped 4 positions.
Yeah, he ran out of fuel, but
he was solidly in the top 5 most of the race.
He was right not too far behind Dixon and Palou. He was right up there, like in qualifying practice. He was not that far off, to be honest. Just, of course, he'll learn from that, and of course, had the fuel held on a little bit more, maybe he would have had an even stronger result. But for Grosjean, what it told me is once again Dale Coyne finding ways, finding hidden gems to some extent. Look with Bourdais and Santino and Palou last year. And now Grosjean, I was mightily impressed how he was able to be right in the mix of probably being this close to making it to the Fast 6. And had it not been for a brief hiccup on pit road, he probably would have finished better than 10th. And that's the good thing to going into St. Petersburg and the rest of the season is if he keeps it up, maybe he'll be in the mix for a top 12 championship campaign. I was mightily impressed with what they were able to do. And I know a lot of people on social media say, oh, look, wow, I'm impressed. Rick Ware doing really well. So I forget this. It's a partnership, but Dale Coyne deserves much of the credit as well. Just once again, finding these drivers, it kind of shows you how IndyCar can be competitive, but there's more parity and variety where the smaller teams could have mighty days or mighty seasons. We got a long ways to go, but if Grosjean keeps it up, the question will be, how close will that Rookie of the Year battle will be between he and Scott McLaughlin? Beating McLaughlin.
Yeah, McLaughlin was not setting the world on fire for sure.
He did all right.
He did okay. Yeah,
it worked out for him. It'll be curious to see how both of them battle, because if it's close, then people would have expected. Then there'll be some question marks whether or not maybe the rumor about him probably trying Gateway will come up exponentially if it's a tight Rookie of the Year battle between those two. And as far as Johnson, the fortunate thing for him is that he finished. It seems like right now he's trying to build and grow and have fun. But yeah, he was nowhere near in the picture compared to the trio Ganassi drivers. He was just not. It'll be interesting to see how over time he gets better and better, see how far off he'll be with the trio, notably Ericsson as season's end, because that will be the good telling of how that 48 team will be with Johnson.
Yeah, I honestly, I didn't expect Jimmy to set the world on fire in his first race, but I didn't expect him to be quite that far off the pace, especially with all the resources of Ganassi. But again, historically, the fourth Ganassi car is the throwaway one. So,
yeah, pretty much. But I think by the end of May, if Kanan is nowhere near in the picture, then yeah, we can probably fully claim that. But that would be the mystery. That's the wild card in my book of that 48 camp is how Kanan will adapt to Texas and especially at Indianapolis. If they're on par, if Kanan's on par with the other Ganassi cars with Penske and Andretti, then it's kind of foretelling that there's a lot of more growing for Johnson. If he's nowhere near it, like Johnson is, like where he's battling basically with Dalton Kellett, pretty much most of what may look like the whole season, then you got to raise some more question marks about that Ford car, like you mentioned.
All right, so let's talk about another car we didn't mention. You mentioned his name briefly, Sebastian Bourdais, with solidly as the team leader at AJ Foyt. Pretty good day for them. The Foyt team has been pretty much bottom of the barrel for much longer than they should have been. But Bourdais really, drove a smart race, got some decent speed out of that car. He wasn't contending for the lead. I do believe he led a lap or two under pit stop exchanges. But overall,
an episode
good.
with Pato as well.
Yep. But overall, good day for Bourdais and a good day for the Foyt team.
No, for sure. That's the kind of runs they really need. Is good that, first of all, Bourdais running the whole IndyCar season, because even when he had those few races that he was able to get because of the pandemic, canceled most of his lineup, the fact that he had responded tremendously well from that strong run at St. Petersburg, which kind of shows you that maybe Bourdais still has a lot more on his sleeves than people will give him credit for. Because if look when Bourdais won't join Dale Coyne, they when he left, they were better when he joined at first, and now he's probably looking like he might do the same thing for Foyt. But of course, there's a lot of puzzles to be solved in an IndyCar race. It's one thing to judge one race, and talk about if this trend continues, maybe he'll have it. So, but right now, superb run, encouraging for that entire Foyt camp that has gone through a lot over the past year with the pandemic and everything going on. The fact that there's stability and probably good continuity has been instrumental for that camp.
Yeah. Like I said, they haven't won a race since 2013 when Sato won at Long Beach for them, and so it's been a long dry spell without a win for the Foyt camp, and it's been since like 1999 since they got a car capable of contending for the championship. But anyway, Bourdais is this interesting character it looked like his racing career was over like at least 3 different times. And he just keeps working hard. He keeps coming back, and wherever he tends to end up, it tends to elevate the results. I mean, if you recall, he's won races with KV Racing. Then he won races with Coyne there. He was with what was it, Dragon Sports or Dragon Speed, which is Jay Penske's team for a little while. Had a couple of decent runs with them. So overall, I think Bourdais is just that kind of driver that benefits the whole team. His feedback.
No question about it. I think that it does help them, and like I said, it's good to have him full time on the grid because they Foyt definitely needed somebody with experience that knows the ins and outs that will elevate the race team, because there's so much that a part-time Kanan, a Charlie Kimball, even a Dalton Kellett could do. When you have a full-time driver like Bourdais, you expect growth. There's no in between.
Right. There's no in between. Yeah. And I think Foyt's tired of the in between. You know, AJ, he's known to be a little grumpy at times. But yeah. So, and again, it's not looking like a great year for the Penske's again, other than Will Power, who had a really good, solid run. The rest of the Penske team, obviously, we talked about Newgarden. Race day ended on lap 1. McLaughlin was just kind of there, you know, getting his feet wet. Pagenaud was kind of midfield. But again, you know, Penske probably had one of their worst years in a while last year as you know, Dixon dominated. Now Will won a couple races late in the year, and I think Simon and Joseph each won one last year, but it's you know, not characteristic of the Penske team we've seen the last couple of years, where they've been banging out championships and Indy 500 wins. So
yeah, in fairness, Joseph had equal amount of wins with Dixon in 4, but that's one thing. But yeah, for Will Power is again having that strong start to the season. Like this, you need to get a strong season going, because the past couple of years, I think I even mentioned in my sidebar article on Motorsports Tribune that I think since his championship year in 2014, I think he's only got like 3 podiums in the season opener, including this past Sunday. It kind of shows you that if you're going to be in this championship, you cannot have a mulligan. A guy like Will Power, if he had a mulligan, that's not a good start to the season. It sets them back completely. And then once they finally get the ball going, it's too little, too late, because they feel like Will feels like strong.
Yeah. What was it? 2015, where they made Will sit out the opener.
Yeah, he had concussion.
They thought he had a concussion.
But he didn't. Yeah, it wasn't concussion.
Didn't have a concussion. He had just had concussion type symptoms brought on by.
It was a cold or something, wasn't it?
Ear infection, something like that. Yeah. So, all right. So we're off to St. Pete. Right away. No week off in between. You know, the Indy Car guys, they're compact to schedule. Once they get going, they race. So St. Pete, you know, one of the great street courses on the IndyCar schedule, has served as a season opener for a number of years. This year they you know, moved the date around a little bit just to make sure that the pandemic numbers would be down in Florida, give it a little extra time. I think this race is generally in mid-March. By putting it in late April, they give an extra month there for vaccinations and whatnot, and to get approvals from the city. And so everything is set, good to go. The track is built. They've had the show car all around the town of St. Pete. The teams will be arriving this weekend for another great race at St. Pete. And so, Louise, who do you like for St. Pete?
I feel like it's going to be a good bounce back race for Joseph Newgarden. He's won twice. He won the last time, but I'll be curious to see how Alexander Rossi does. If you look a year ago, outside of Newgarden, it seems like that was Rossi's race until the whole circumstances went down. So I feel like Rossi would be a good pick to win the race. And that will be also a good test to see how Bourdais with Foyt will respond. I will not sleep on him of probably getting a top 5 afternoon. If things work out, like look back at 2018 when he drove for Coyne, he may steal one here, which will be a huge deal for them going into the month.
Yeah, Bourdais stolen a couple there at St. Pete, hasn't he?
Yeah, like what happened?
One with it was Rossi and Wickens tangled.
Yeah, the one that Wickens pretty much should have won that debut race.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, I also like Alexander Rossi for this race. I think that you know, I thought he was highly underwhelming in Barber, and I'm not quite sure why. I really haven't read a lot of his comments, but
it got underwhelming after like the first pit stop when he couldn't beat O'Ward. It got relatively close at one point at the start of the race.
Yeah, but I like Rossi for this race. I also like O'Ward. I mean, I think this McLaren team is the real deal, you know. And I think O'Ward does have a few things to learn yet, but I mean, he's with a great organization, so I think you got to watch out for him too. Now, Richard, what do you think?
I was going to pick O'Ward as well. I thought he drove well at Barber there. It'd be interesting to know why he couldn't get those, soft Firestones in the groove, as it were, on that first stint. Was that, car setup? Was that his driving style? What caused that? But I think he's the real deal. Like, he really is, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes. If it was just a flash in the pan, which I genuinely don't think it was.
No, I don't think. I don't think he's.
I don't think
no.
from the end of the season they'll be in championship contention, but I think they'll certainly nick the odd win here or there. And nick the win. Actually get it on merit. Win races on merit there. And I think give it another year or two, and if McLaren as a team can stay stable in terms of personnel and driver lineup, I think they've got a really good driver lineup right now. And I know they've talked even about potentially adding a third car to the mix there. I really think that they could be contenders in a few years, but it wouldn't surprise me if Award doesn't get the job done this weekend. If he doesn't, another young kid, Colton Herta, why not? I still personally think the jury's out a little bit on him. I know, Frank, you read him very highly, don't you? But I'm not maybe as convinced right now, but it'll be interesting to see what he can do.
Well, I think he's very consistent. He's one of these drivers that when he's on, he's on. When he's on, he's unbeatable. But there are other days where he's like a little bit like he's a bit like Rossi in that respect.
Yeah, and that doesn't win you championships, unfortunately, does it? You look at Dixon, he's perfect. He's like the minimal risk. He's almost like the Jackie Stewart, isn't he, of Indy Car racing? Modern day. If he has to win,
Alan Prost is another guy I like to compare Dixon to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if he has to win, if he has to finish 7th or above to win the championship, he'll finish 6th or 7th. He does what he has to do and won't take any risks, and he's got his eye on the prize rather than his ego and records or anything like that. And you take care of what you need to do in that specific moment in time, and the championships and the wins and the records come with that mentality.
Yeah, and you can just look at Scott Dixon's record to attest to that. So,
yep.
The interesting thing we talk about McLaren potentially adding a third car. Now we do know that they are running 3 cars at Indianapolis, and they're bringing Juan Montoya in, and I think that's going to be for both Award and Felix Rosenqvist to an extent. I think that's going to be a really great experience for them to work with a guy of Montoya's caliber for the month of May. Like I said, Ward, I believe, has some learning to do. His teammate last year was also another rookie, Oliver Askew. Now Rosenqvist got a little more racing experience on him, but not too many. He's only got 2 years in Indy Car. But I bring a guy like Montoya in there who can drive anything and win in anything. And Montoya also has the ability to walk away from something for a number of years and then walk right back in and win again. I think that's going to benefit the whole team highly.
For sure.
They got it for the whole month. Yeah.
Yeah. And as Alonso showed, to a certain extent, the Indy 500 as well, probably more so than any, maybe Monaco you'd put in the same, breath. You can't just go there and be quick. You've got to go there and learn the place and learn the subtleties and the nuances of the track, and the racecraft at a place like Indianapolis is completely different to any super speedway, any road course, any street circuit. It's a unique place, and to have somebody who's won there and can give that experience, and you say to guys like Award, and Rosenqvist, follow him for 10 laps. Go out there, follow him, learn his lines, learn what he does as the tires drop off, do all of these sort of things, and I think that's an invaluable tool for that team.
The interesting thing about Montoya's 2 Indy 500 wins are they're very different to one another. I mean, in the first win back in 2000, he pretty much dominated the race. I believe he started second or third. I think he started middle of the front row and pretty much dominated the race. perfect pit stops all day long. It, led the most laps. But then his second win in 2015, if you recall, he dropped all the way to the back early in the race when he got a little tangled up with somebody else's incident and broke off the rear bumper pod. Had to come in and have that replaced. So then he had to spend the rest of that 500 miles, far from just giving up, saying, "Oh, our race is over." He was able to make up all that time and get to the front and battle his teammate Will Power for the win. So here's a guy who's pretty much done it all, and the guy only has 6 Indy 500 starts.
To win.
And aside from a last place finish the year after he won, he has a strong average finish, if I recall.
Yeah. That's a 300. That's a 300 hit ratio. That's pretty damn good, isn't it? Really,
it's not bad at all. Not bad at all. So, all right. It'll be fun to watch the Indy Cars at St. Pete again. That's always one of my favorite races. Beautiful little street course. They have neat parties down there. They call it the world's largest spring break, although it's a little later than spring break this year. It's closer to exam time before the end of the school year.
Graduation, formal parties, and all that.
Yeah,
those college kids do.
The prom, right? So
I don't know about proms in this pandemic era. I'm pretty sure maybe Florida and Texas will have some. I don't know. But the prom game ended 8 years ago when I graduated, so why would I know?
The prom game ended for me back in the 1980s.
Alan, yes, REO Speedwagon days.
Yes. REO Speedwagon was on the charts, right? So anyway, NASCAR down in Richmond, we had a pretty good race down there. Alex Bowman snuck in the win at the end there in the final restart, but it was Logano and Truex were making the most noise up front earlier on.
And Hamlin.
Yes, you're right. I forgot about Hamlin. I just tend to. Hamlin's always an afterthought for me. I don't know why. It just.
But the guy who led the most laps
all
this
these
season.
top fives without a win.
Yeah.
Have like an 80-point lead already in the regular standings.
Yeah, he said we figured out how to finish third. So. All right,
but I don't blame you there because he's just quietly get those top 3 finishes, especially when I do those podium finishes, race reports. It's like, oh, Hamlin got top 3. Just flew under the radar and got a top 3. It's kind of like a Matt Kenseth 2003 season almost.
Yeah. So, what were your thoughts about the Richmond race? Here's again, it's traditionally been a night race in the past. This was a day race. So,
the spring race has typically been a day race for the past several years. From what I was able to see, because with the Indy Car race going on at the same time, of course, the Indy Car race takes priority in that regard. But what I was able to see, it seems like everything was mellowed out and calm. Unlike the truck race in the final stage where everything was, there were wrecks left and right and all of that. John Hunter Nemechek won that truck race, by the way. But for the Cup race, it seemed to be calm. And then Alex Bowman just showed up from out of nowhere, and he was able to muscle his way through Logano, Hamlin, and Truex, and was able to pull this win, which was a good surprise for, honestly, the competition. Because sometimes if you're in the right spot, depending on circumstances, you deliver more often than not, you'll be able to pull off the win. That's just how this car and how things work these days in NASCAR. So it was a calm race. I know some people didn't like it, but others did, in the fact that it let itself play out close to natural in this day and age.
Yeah, it was. Like you say, it played out naturally. Yep, that's a good way to put it. Richard, what are your thoughts on Richmond here?
As you say, Alex Bowman, he nicked one there a little bit. He flew under the radar a little bit, and you've got to be. What are we now? 8 races into the season, maybe 10. I've lost track already. But if you're guys like Denny Hamlin, you're getting a little bit concerned. You got Talladega coming up next weekend, which is whatever. And who knows? They must be looking at the bigger picture, thinking, we need to win one of these now, guys. Come on, let's get it done. It's difficult to say, really.
Yeah, you've got, like I said, Hamlin, Kyle Busch hasn't won a race yet. Keselowski. You got a lot of Chase Elliott hasn't won a race yet, has he?
No, has he not? No.
No, I don't believe he has. So you got a lot of potential winners out there. And again, like you said, Talladega coming up, which is a crapshoot. We could have Cody Ware win Talladega for all we know. So, and speaking of Talladega, no. So now, Louise, did you hear this story about Jennifer Jo Cobb, who's been running trucks for the last several years, was going to make her Cup debut at Talladega, and then NASCAR decided to disallow her entry? Louise?
Oh, I've heard about it, and you brought up Cody Ware winning it. I didn't mean to just blow your mind like that. So. Yeah, let's not. Yeah, I don't want that. I cannot imagine that vision. Harrison Burton will be making his debut by himself. Of course, you mentioned Jennifer Jo Cobb. Yes, I certainly have. I found out, like literally everybody else. Honestly, what they saw is based on quality of performance. It had nothing to do with the Richmond race that I was referring about, where she and Norm Banding had a little beef going on in turns 3 and 4. It had nothing to do with that. It's just based on experience. But it did turn out that Jennifer Jo Cobb was eligible to run Cup back in 2015. But it's just a very fine line where the rules are what they are. But then people are bringing up, why can't she run? But why Derek Cope or why Quinn Half?
Right. But isn't it like a peer review process? Don't like the drivers have to vote? I remember this, like was it last year they disallowed James Davison to make a debut at Talladega, and instead he made his debut at Pocono?
Yeah, Talladega, also the Daytona 500 he was thinking of running, but that didn't work. I think it's more or less of I'd imagine it's down to a peer review, driver council, but where they judge on the quality of the performance. Because I think 11 times she's ever finished on the lead lap in trucks out of 210 starts.
Yeah, that's not great, is it?
It's not a good batting average. Understandably, she's driving her own equipment, not the best equipment in the world either. But they look on a lot of things. I think it's safe to say if you want to make your Cup debut, you must do it anywhere but the plate tracks. Because then maybe they'll be more kind of letting you run after you make a debut elsewhere. Whereas Harrison Burton's Cup debut is at Talladega, but I think the difference is that Harrison has been a proven winner in Xfinity. Look at last year, he won 3 or 4 times as a rookie. I think it's more of a comfort level and how competitive you are in the lower series. Harrison has proven that more so in Xfinity than in trucks, because the trucks he wasn't able to win in a KBM truck.
They're in a different league.
Yeah, like I said, but the rule itself is the eligibility rule is not clear. You know what I mean? It's not set in stone that says you have to have, X amount of races on this kind of track, X amount of races here, or X amount of finishes, which of course leads to the perception of maybe this is sexism in play, right? Which some people are alluding to, which in my mind, if you think about it, that would be the last thing NASCAR wants to do, because NASCAR has, if nothing else, have tried to embrace diversity as much as they can lately. So I really wouldn't say that this call is sexist, but it does, without a clear-cut rule or reason, it does open it up to that interpretation by some folks who want to play that card.
That's just finding something for the sake of finding it, isn't it, really? I don't think there's anything in there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's sexism at all.
At the end of the day, you, especially when you go to a plate track like Talladega, Daytona, Talladega, it is going to be, the ramifications of a mistake there are amplified, massively. If you make a mistake at Bristol or Martinsville, you're going to have a bruised ego at most. If you make a mistake at Talladega in the pack, you're playing with people's lives, in effect here. So to earn the right to race a cup car at a plate track is no given, and it shouldn't be. It really genuinely shouldn't be. There's a reason why, experienced NASCAR veterans who have been doing this 20 years plus sit at the back of the pack and drive around and keep out the way of, some of the lesser experienced drivers, because they know what can happen in a blink of an eye, and it's just not worth it. So I think it's very, very unfortunate. And, you know, I'm sure she would have been okay there, but you just cannot take the risk. Imagine if, God forbid, something had happened. And, you know, NASCAR they'd be the first people that people would point the fingers at and say, well, look, you know, you guys allowed it. So, you know, this is very, very, very fine line, and they've got to draw a limit somewhere, unfortunately.
All right. Yeah. Good. Well put. Well put. Well, we are just about at our time limit, so I guess we need to probably pick a winner for Talladega, which is always, like I said, just throw some names in a hat. Now, I'm not really going to pick Cody Ware. I was joking with that, but I will go with Brad Keselowski, who's got a great track record at Talladega. When he's managed to avoid the big one, he's been up at the front. He's won there several times. So I'm going to go with Keselowski.
I'm going to go with Chase Elliott in this one, with the dark horse driver to keep an eye on being Corey LaJoie and even Harrison Burton. He's got standards to live up to, considering what Austin Cindric was able to do in the 500, albeit it was a Penske car. But Gone Brothers, they had a good showing in the qualifying races, but just going to make the field by just mere inches with Tide, Dillon.
Now, is Austin running Talladega?
Cindric is not running Talladega.
Okay. All right. Now, Richard, who do you like for Talladega? I guess you can't pick Austin Cindric because he's not running.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yeah. You don't want to pick one of the Matt DiBenedetto.
There's a guy that needs a win, Matt DiBenedetto.
Yeah, he's gone off the boil a little bit this year, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I
I
would
would
have at Richmond, but imagine a win will do them any one. It's not just for DiBenedetto, who's trying to find a ride at 2022, but also give the Wood Brothers that elusive 100 win. Especially,
there you go. Yep.
Yeah, they've been chasing that for a while. Yeah, but I think a Matt DiBenedetto win would make a lot of folks smile. I really do. He's just a good dude.
Mm-hmm. It'll be a sentimental win for the team as well, because I think Beatrice Wood passed away not that long ago as well.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. Well, we are out of time, so I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. And I want to thank you, Louise, and thank you, Richard. Most of all, I want to thank you folks that listen to us every week. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website.